Welcome to Ourgame, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out at torpy.ie and enter the promo code Ourgame to get yourself 10% off. Michael Verney, we're back. How are things with you today?
Good, yeah, good. Kind of digested all the weekend's action, and geez, there's some fairly juicy games to look forward to this weekend.
There is, yeah, and we're hoping things are a little bit more exciting than last weekend. Not that you can kind of blame any of the players or whatever. As I found out this week, going back hurling training, there's a bit of an adjustment period required.
There's so much. The movements involved. It's grand running straight lines and running in groups and pucking around with lads or whatever, but the different movements involved and just coordinating everything, even shooting at speed, delivering, a slick pass at speed. It's so easy to make a mistake, and you can forgive. That's why an overreaction to anything last weekend is a bit foolish, really. You probably need to put things in perspective. County teams are back a couple of weeks. Club teams are seeing just how difficult it is. They're expecting everybody to be perfect when counties go back playing. That's just not the case. It's not the way it is. Like, how was your body even after you went back training? Because it's totally alien, and you haven't done that realistically in 8 months nearly since the club season finished?
Yeah, I think it was late September the last time I played a game, and there's several months there. Like, I got a couple of comments on that Copycats video I did with Nisha Waldron, where we were attempting to do Kieran Doyle's point for Westmeath. And you wouldn't want to be too sensitive, but luckily most of the comments.
I actually thought, Shane, genuinely, I thought you were about 80 yards from the goal.
It did look like
so
that.
Far back.
And John Maher, the Independent, was on to me as well, asking me how far out we were. But no, it was actually on the 45, but whatever it was with the camera angle, it looked like it was way farther out. But I'm telling you, after the first one where it was a swing and a miss, I thought I'm under awful pressure here, because Nisha's a very tasty hurler, and I can't. Well, look, have a look if you haven't seen it already. Have a look. But just doing the training session, obviously everyone knows you can't do more than groups of 15, including the coaches. So we just a couple of small-sided games, a few drills, all that kind of stuff. Presumably the same as every club is doing. But you would be out of puff, like you'd be feeling it early, because you're just not used to doing it. And then there's like running hard at lads, or like changing the direction and getting knocked and bumped and trying to twist and turn and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of getting used to. So I've a better appreciation of what the players did last Saturday and Sunday after training on Tuesday.
I genuinely think there is no game like hurling as regards being match fit. I do think it's much easier to slip into a soccer or a Gaelic football. I just think there's so many different movements going on. The angles the ball can come at you in hurling. I just don't think there's any game like it as regards. If you're not up to scratch, if you're not up to match fitness, you will be found out big time. At county level, you'll be absolutely destroyed. At club level, even, you would be very, very badly exposed. So there'll be a lot of lads trying to brush up their skills and get up to speed over the next couple of weeks to make sure that doesn't happen. But listen, if it happens to me or you, at least we'll say we have an excuse.
Yeah, and we normally have them. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by Bamboo. If you want to get 10% off a new bamboo stick, and I used that in the skills video with Nisha Waldron, you can have a look there at 10% off with the promo code Ourgame. Just use all caps for the moment. So
that was clearly the key. That was obviously the key to it, because there's no way I thought you were getting it, particularly after the first one. So the bamboo is obviously the way to go.
But as it went on, you were thinking, I don't think this lad is going to miss again. I only got 1 out of 5, but still. Can we just quickly rehash the fixtures from last weekend, or the results? Cork beat Waterford well. Galway had 30 points to spare over Westmeath. Limerick and Tipperary drew, and over in Division 1 Group B, Antrim beat Clare, Wexford hockeyed Laois, and Kilkenny beat Dublin by 5 points at Parnell Park. Division 2A, Kerry beat Down, Offaly beat Meath, and Carlow saw off Wicklow. Then 2B, Donegal beat Roscommon, and Mayo had that win over Derry. So this weekend, we're going to jump straight into the fixtures. Well, we would, but first of all, there are special powers that apparently the advantage rule can be changed. Look, we're not going to labour the point too much because I think everyone is sick to their back teeth of it at this stage. But just a quick little point on that advantage rule, that it can actually be changed.
Yeah, obviously the kind of the talk after last weekend was this was a decision made at Congress, and the advantage rule, you know, the controversy over the past weekend where referees are blowing rather than having the hand in the air and allowing an advantage. They're blowing nearly the whole time, and I know Mick Fennelly said that he thinks he foresees a summer of freeze ahead, and David Herity was very strong against it, and Davy Fitz was strong against it in the paper this morning. And a lot of people would be thinking that it's in for the league and it's in for the summer. It can actually be changed. So the GAA's managing committee has the power to reverse the change that was made if there's, you know, further opposition to it. If, you know, the clamour for change remains, and there's very few people saying, oh, I give this a chance, or this is here to stay. There's very few people saying that because it doesn't make sense. But last year, because of, you know, things around COVID and how changes just needed to be made without a Congress or without even an emergency Congress, the Cushta Banishti have powers to make changes to the game, make rules changes to the game. For example, there's 7 substitutions in the league games now, which is an absolute disaster for a journalist. It's hard enough to keep up to date with 5 or even blood subs, but that was passed in recent weeks. That went to a management committee of Cushta Banishti, and they passed that. So technically, there's actually no reason why they couldn't change this if they see it. If they see the advantage rule and the changes that they've made, there's no reason why they couldn't change it back to the old rule. And just even referees have been given out about the rule. Even Donald Smith, the head of referees, said last week, you know, the referees will just have to referee to the rule. It's not something that they're particularly happy with. It's not something that they feel makes sense, but they'll referee to the rule. But even referees are not happy with it. Managers aren't happy with it, spectators, players. It was probably the main takeaway point of last weekend. So it can be changed. Contrary to what some people were saying, it can actually be changed.
It's about as popular as the water charges, let's be honest.
Good man.
We'll jump into the fixtures. So Galway, as we said, they had a very heavy win over Westmeath last weekend. That puts them top of Division 1. Group A. Limerick had a draw with Tipperary. So Limerick will go and visit Pearse Stadium this weekend. Last year, you and I were both down at the Gaelic grounds, and Joe Cannon got injured during that game, and in the latter period, the tribe started to fall away a little bit. You and I both felt that there was 7 points between the teams that day, and I think on the basis of that, you wouldn't have expected Galway to get so close in the All-Ireland semi-final. So I think we both have a sense that this game, there's a bit more to it than just being another league game, and league is league.
Oh God, there definitely is. Yeah, like if you look at like when Limerick won the All-Ireland in 2018, they went down to Pearse Stadium and got a big win against Galway. And then all of a sudden, you know, that September or late August, they go and beat Galway in the All-Ireland
Were they about 10 points behind in that game, or was that the game against, was that the year Galway won the All-Ireland? They were 10 points behind against Waterford in the league and turned it around. Maybe both of them 2 years in a row, they both did something similar.
I think they both came from behind. And if you look at even last year, Limerick kind of making a statement. They were 10 down against Tipperary, the reigning All-Ireland champions, come back and win by 1 score. I think that, like, fair enough, it's league and it's early season, but there is a chance to make a little statement and just kind of almost seep into the opposition's subconscious. Like, for example, like last weekend, if Tipperary had been beaten by Limerick last weekend, that would have been a disaster. Now, I still think psychologically Limerick have the advantage because Limerick were 5 down coming down the stretch and still managed to get a result, and in their minds they'd be almost thinking, you know, they threw the kitchen sink at us and they still weren't able to beat us. So it's going to be interesting this weekend. They're coming in off 2 completely different kind of setups. Like Galway had, fair enough, you know, they destroyed Westmeath last weekend. The level of opposition is not in any way comparable to what they're going to meet this weekend. So they had a glorified challenge game last weekend, put up a huge score. Everyone played well. One of those games where everyone played well. No one, apart from maybe Aidan Murphy, who made a couple of mistakes, no one was really under pressure. And they're coming into this weekend and they're facing a totally different animal this weekend. Whereas Limerick last weekend, like, how many Limerick lads came out on top in their jewels last weekend? Two or three maybe. They managed to get a kick up the rear end, still get a result. And I think they'll improve massively this weekend. And I think they'll be much more up to speed this weekend than Galway will. But it is a massive chance for Galway to make a statement. Shane O'Neill said he'd have a lot of his big hitters back. He'd have Dottie Burke, Joe Canning and Pádraig Mannion fit to play. Interesting to see, do all three of them come in? Is that a statement in itself if all three of them come in? Like there's no current form to warrant those three guys coming in ahead of three guys that played last weekend, but it's a statement if they do come in.
Well, maybe you've made the exact point that Galway are saying, and did say even before the league started, to themselves, if we're not going to use Pádraig Mannion, Dottie Burke and Joe Canning, arguably our three most important players, that we therefore are targeting it and putting a huge lot of stock in this sort of game. Another point I wanted to make on top of that, you mentioned Éanna Murphy, the goalkeeper for Galway, and obviously there was the disaster in the Leinster final for him last year. You know, he's a young player, you don't want to be too critical, but you know, I mean, it just gets highlighted so much when you're a goalkeeper when you make a mistake because you've nobody really to bail you out. So he needs a response this week. But then again, Limerick aren't necessarily lighting games up with goals. It's not really something they do. But it's a test for him, whatever way it pans out. You'd imagine to be some sort of a test. And then for Gearóid McInerney, is he going to remain full back? Will Aaron Gillane be available? And obviously he's very tight fade at the moment. I don't know if anyone's seen it on Instagram. It's something special, Aaron. And I don't know if that was a COVID cut or not, but I don't know. There has to be questions asked about that. But look, obviously he's a class hurler. Will he be there? So will Gearóid McInerney, number one, whether it's Seamus Flanagan or somebody else, how will he go there? Will he continue to look fairly solid at full back? And you know, he wasn't dominating games at centre back in the last couple of seasons, as David Connor, the Tuam Herald, explained to us here a couple of weeks ago. So will he go full back, and will Dahi remain in the half back line? And will Pádraig Mannion play sweeper, or will he be in the half back line or midfield as well? So there's a lot of questions to be answered about Galway. So that's why I think this is such a big game.
Yeah, and like we talked about the All-Ireland semi-final last year, at no stage did you actually think there was going to be a smash and grab, that Galway were actually going to win. Like,
especially after Cathal Mannion went off.
Yeah. So like, if they were playing a sweeper, they were probably going to have to hurt Limerick from out the pitch. Mannion went off. There's, potentially 2 or 3 points from out the pitch taken off you. With Joe Canning going off the pitch as well, there's another option, another big kind of long-range score off the pitch. But with the way they set up, you didn't actually think it was more containment. And now, if containment was the name of the game, it definitely contained them right into injury time. They weren't able to kick on and win the game. But it'll be interesting to see. They contained them for stages last year. And I think the All-Ireland semi-final, the way they set up was probably somewhat based on how they got opened up in that league game down in the Gaelic grounds last year, and they didn't want that to happen again. And Shane O'Neill's kind of intimate knowledge of Limerick, I'd say, was part and parcel of why they made that move. Now you'll just wonder, will they step it on a bit? Will we see a bit more 15-on-15? Will they go to try and actually win the game at the weekend now? And that's going to be interesting. And as well as that, I know I said it was a glorified challenge game last weekend, but it was 60 minutes in under the belt for a lot of guys. Whereas if you bring in Pádraig Mannion, if you bring in Joe Canning, if you bring in Dottie Burke, they are coming in a small bit cold. They won't have had a competitive game under their belt. So going to be interesting to see the decisions and even the statements that Shane O'Neill will make by who he starts and who he doesn't start.
And we just got a comment in there on Twitter from Random Man. He goes, free takers becoming more and more important in the game, and Tip have the best one in the game at present. He's obviously referring to Jason Ford. His batting average must be 90%. Kilkenny, Cork, Galway, Limerick also blessed with good takers in the 80% zone. The other counties are struggling now in this area. I'd say Joe Canning has to be in your 90% area as well. That'd be something now to try and crunch the numbers and all that, because stats aren't as freely available in GAA as they might be in soccer, which are Opta stats and whatever else you have. But actually, who would you say is it has to be between TJ Reid, Joe Canning, Aaron Gillane can't be too far off, Ford, Patrick Horgan. Wow, the top teams. It's no surprise that the top teams all have brilliant free takers. This is nothing new, but it isn't a surprise.
It's an indictment of the way the game has changed, and even with the advantage rule as well, though, that there's more and more frees. Like that's not what people want. I don't want to watch a match where it's Jason Ford, 14 points, 12 frees or 13 frees. You want a game. The barometer almost for the standard of a game and an enjoyable game would be something like TJ Reid, 1-9, 5 frees or something like that. 5 or 6 scoreable frees. I think the more and more frees, the teams with the better free takers will obviously prosper, but that's not necessarily what we want to see. As regards, if I did want a free taker and had my life dependent on it, probably be TJ, even though he missed one or two the other day. He missed a really scoreable one the other day against Dublin. Then went back into his own half and hit one that was, way lower percentage shot, and then put it over the bar. But if my life depended on it, I'd probably take TJ. Closely, probably followed by Ford. Ford doesn't generally miss much either.
Just Canning is very good as well. Patrick Horgan is unbelievable. I don't know how you'd pick here. And people, get your comments in on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you're watching it. I think that's a very hard one to call. And I don't think a snap decision being made here on the live show is the way to decide this. I can't decide off the top of my head.
Well, I thought about this a good bit, and I think we picked best free taker last year, and I think I had TJ at the top of my pile. But you could throw a blanket over 4 or 5, and I think that's why when you see people's fantasy hurling teams, there'll be generally 5 or 6 forwards in it, and it's basically Ford, Horgan, Reid, Canning, Gallan probably as well, and Stephen Bennett too.
I wonder, will there be a clamour actually on the Fantasy League to throw in Canning this weekend if it's going to be against Limerick, and if he does start? So obviously you'll wait to see if he starts. Waterford have Westmeath, and I think they'll be expecting to put up a good score, so maybe you'll see a few more going for Stephen Bennett. You'd expect he'd put up a bit of a score. And Kilkenny, TJ Reid actually, if he's not already in most people's teams, which he probably will, is in against Antrim. But look, we'll come back to that in a while. So when they played off last year, that was Shane O'Neill's second game for Galway as manager. And, it was obviously just going up the road for him to play a game at the LIT Gaelic grounds. He's an Apeirshig native there in the city. Do you think they've evolved much in that time? Are we seeing much of a change in Galway?
Oh, I think they've evolved a fair bit since last year. He was obviously a late enough appointment too. They were kind of chasing themselves, and fitness-wise, were a nice bit behind Limerick at the time. Limerick had hit the ground running. They'd been back pretty early, having been beaten in the All-Ireland semi-final last year. When a team is beaten, they were All-Ireland champions in 18, obviously. They were beaten in 19. And when you're not champions, you're usually back a good bit earlier. You're usually looking to hit the ground running. Limerick were flying it early last year. Well, they were flying it at every stage last year, being honest. But they were a good bit ahead of Galway at that stage. If you look at the body shape of the Galway guys last weekend, they've definitely put in a big pre-season under Lucas Kersenstein, and we talked about just how body shapes have changed. Evan and a couple of other guys who are much smaller do look like they've bulked up an awful lot. So physically, I expect them to be at a very, very similar stage to Limerick at this stage, at the early stage of the year. It's just a matter of tactically how they go about probably upsetting, particularly the Limerick half forward line. The big thing for Limerick the last day is, in relative terms, outside of Seamus Flanagan, they didn't, and Tom Morrissey, they probably didn't really start any other one of their starting 6 forwards, and yet they were still able to bring in Garrod Hegarty, bring in Cian Lynch, and get a result. Hegarty will be starting this weekend, I'd imagine. Cian Lynch will be starting this weekend, I'd imagine, too. Interesting from Kylie's point of view as well. So Sean Finn started full back the last day, and Richie English was cornerback, and Barry Nash was out wing back. So if Dan Morrissey is fit to play this weekend, does he play at 3 or does he play at 7? And it's going to be, if Declan Hannon is back, what other ways are the defence jigged around as well? So I would be expecting a nearly full strength team this weekend. And after the drawing last weekend and getting away with one, let's call a spade, they probably should have been beaten last weekend. I think they'll be keen to lay down a marker this weekend for later on in the year. They've done it before, and he, in fairness to Cody, it's like the Cody treatment. He always gives the league utmost respect and realises that if you let teams beat you, even if it's a league match, it does seep in. They seem coming up against Limerick. Then there's that bit of confidence maybe that there shouldn't be, or that they don't want opposition teams to have. So I think they'll go and try and lay down a marker this weekend against probably what a lot of people view as the most serious contenders for their All-Ireland crown.
I think that 2018 league game between Limerick and Tipperary and Thurles was a big one for the evolution and the belief of this Limerick team. Tip had that game kind of under control, if I remember correctly, and then the game ended up going to extra time. Now Tipperary eventually won. There was a couple of mistakes, I think short puck outs, and Jason Ford scored a goal. I mean, we're talking 3 years ago at this point. But I think, yeah, I'd actually fully agree with you there that the league can be very, very important. And if you want to keep up this psychological edge that you have over your opposition, you keep beating them. You don't want to give oxygen to Galway and let them know, hey, you might be well able to knock us out come summertime. You want
my big takeout, Shane, out of that game down in Thurles that night is you were there, and it was about a week after Coola won the All Ireland, and you could still smell the porter off you in the press box.
Well, look, I'm not here to advocate for drinking or whatever, but like this was exceptional circumstances, and I drank 8 out of the 9 days after that All Ireland final. So
congrats, well done.
Yeah, and I haven't recovered from it. There's a couple of comments in on YouTube actually. Clippers fan said, yeah, you're right, Shane. Galway were hammering Limerick at half-time in the league in 2018, somehow blew the lead in the second half. He also added, the reason free takers are so important is because teams do tactical fouling in the opposition half to stop counter-attacks. That's an interesting point. Conor Lenihan, David Reedy is up there, great free taker, although I think Tony Kelly took them last week. And then Clippers fan Evan Nyland looks unnecessarily big. I don't think I'd agree with that. I think he just looks in great nick altogether. I think he had a great performance last week, moving around the pitch well. I think he's the sort of player who's going to be able to move into space and pick up possession. Do you know the way Thomas Muller does for Bayern Munich, the space invader? I think that's something that he might be able to do. But there's going to be flexibility in that Galway forward line. Players milling around the place as they did last year. You could see Conor Whelan out at centre forward at times. I think that's going to happen again this year, and it'll have to, because Limerick are probably the most flexible team, versatile team that we've seen in a long, long time, and we talked about that for a couple of years. But if you can move a couple of lads into positions where they might feel like they're a little bit out of position, that'd be no harm. Like, could you get Diarmaid Byrnes back into cornerback? Would they just swap with players during the middle of a game? But sometimes you can't. You know yourself, you've played in wing back. Sometimes you're dragged into cornerback and you might feel a little bit out of position, or Declan Hannon get him out to fullback the odd time. It mightn't pan out that way, but if you can do it, it's great.
It's to try and do it mid-play, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Don't give them a chance to switch. I'd say a Clippers fan could have been talking about David Reedy from Limerick, the free taker too there as well.
Oh, sorry,
apologies. I did see David Reedy from Clare hitting frees. He was actually practicing frees before the matchup in Antrim the other day. But Limerick have good options. Like they've a good replacement free taker as well. It's almost like they've nearly every box kind of ticked. That's why, from a Galway point of view, everybody before the league started was probably predicting Limerick to win the league, and were probably most of them, apart from maybe you, which are tip kind of Goebel's background, they would have been tipping. So if all Limerick are beaten, should have been last week, and if they're beaten this weekend, then all of a sudden it starts to look like there's traces of the 2019 season there, where they were beaten. They obviously won the league, but they were beaten 3 times in the championship in 2019.
Yeah, but Dublin won the All Ireland in football last year, even after having a few like errant league games, drawing a few games and what have you. I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference come summertime.
I just think there is an aura of invincibility about them because they haven't been beaten in a while. So I do think Dublin had been beaten, but as All Ireland champions, and particularly with Dublin, they were coming back an awful lot later and off the pace somewhat. The fact that they were teams while still being off the pace was a worry for everybody else. Whereas if Galway can beat a Limerick side who are fairly on point, it would be a big statement. They'll have a stick to beat them with, because basically so many things were showing up last weekend, but they still managed to get a result. So he's a stick to beat them with, despite the fact that they weren't even beaten in the game, which I think is hugely positive from their point of view.
Okay, Waterford against Westmeath this weekend, and after the defeat to Cork, Liam Cahill will certainly want a response. Do you see that coming? To be honest, look, it's hard not to see Waterford winning this game down in Walsh Park at home against a team that lost by 30 points. And even for Shane O'Brien, after one game to be on minus 30, there's got to be part of that panel or part of the management team or even the supporters wondering how bad might this league campaign get. You look through the fixture list, it's not going to get any easier. I mean, like Cork, Limerick, Tipperary, Waterford left in this campaign. Like, some would argue this is your best chance to put in a good performance, because of all of those sides, probably Waterford are the least free scoring.
Up 127 last weekend in defeat. which is a fair tally. I think from Liam Cattle's point of view, I think he'd be hugely disappointed. Could be a goal internally. I think they'd be hugely disappointed if they conceded a goal this weekend. Conceded 5 to Cork last weekend, and the defence was cut open. It was like the Red Sea almost opening there at different stages when Cork took them on. They're playing a lower class of opposition, so I think that'll be one of the main goals, would be to make sure that they don't concede a goal this weekend. Do I expect them to bounce back? Yeah, I'd expect them to bounce back in style. I don't know whether Jamie Barron's going to be fit to play, but he's just so crucial for them. We could see Shane Bennett this weekend as well. They're still like a couple of the guys last year, particularly the half-forward line from last year. Jack Fagan was quiet enough the other day. Neil Montgomery was quiet enough the other day. You have to take things in perspective too. Like, they're back training about 3 weeks, no more than any other teams. But like, you can't place too much stock on one game. It's not as if they were annihilated by Cork. They still finished well against Cork, still put up a good score. I would be expecting a fair reaction, and a good positive result, and maybe a double digits win, and Waterford are back on track and could still chase a place near the top of the table if they get a good result this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm trying to reflect on Westmeath's performance against Galway, and just athletically, there's a gap to be bridged there, and that's going to be tough to do. And in the first half, they scored 3 points from play, and you consider what Galway had put up during that period, like 3-18. I mean, obviously there was frees in that too. But, as the game went on, they began to fade. And if Waterford are a team that are fit enough to keep going against Cork in a game where they're beaten badly and score 1-3 from the 72nd minute to the 74th minute, they're not going to stop running. We obviously saw that. They got to an All-Ireland final last year, came back from a mile behind to beat Kilkenny. I do worry a little bit for Westmeath here. Like, Davy Glennon had some good moments, I felt. Obviously, Kieran Doyle, as we talked about, had that great score. Niall O'Brien has scores in him as well. Niall Mitchell came off the bench and I thought did okay for himself. But, you try to be as positive as you can about this, but it's hard not to feel that there could be a big scoreline put up.
Yeah, and look, when you compare the two divisions, or the two groups, I should say, but they are two divisions. There's absolutely no comparison. Westmeath would have felt before the league, if they were in Group 1B, coming up against Laois and Antrim, and to a lesser extent Dublin, that they had some chance of getting a result. But realistically, it's just you have no chance of a result. As we said last week, their most important game in the league is going to be that relegation playoff to try and stay in Division 1. I believe that the group are going to be reassessed a bit next year. So if they did stay up on B, which would give them more, not more competitive games, but more realistically competitive games. Not to say they're not competitive. They're coming up against some of the best teams in the land, but I don't know. It's very demoralising, and it's almost like, a horse finishing, real far down the field in against better grade of horses. It's like a horse can't feel it, but a human can. It's demoralising. It's demoralising to be well beaten in games, and then when you come up against opposition that should be on the same level as yourself, maybe psychologically it has an effect. In the Joe McDonagh last year, Westmeath were one of the favourites beforehand, and all of a sudden, having played Division 1 hurling but be well beaten, they went back to something like their own grade, and they weren't even able to get up to that level in their own grade. So I don't know if it's counterproductive for them. It's hard to go back to training every Monday or Tuesday night after taking a pasting. When you're looking at that 3-18 to 10 points at half time the other day, they're 17 points down at half time. It's not simple going to train the next night and trying to make sure that lads are get lads to stick at it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a tough job for Shane O'Brien and for his management team there. Hopefully the players will stick at it and turn the corner to some degree. But I'm definitely
I hope I'm not going to cross as negative. I'm just trying to be realistic as to what their chances are in that division. That's just stating a fact.
Yeah, well, even if you are coming across as negative, it's not like it's unrealistic, and it's not like you're trying to discourage Westmeath in any way, shape or form. But there's a reality here that they are a little bit off it at the moment, and they didn't push all the way in the Joe McDonagh Cup either, in terms of feeling like they were going to win it. So, I mean, this is the facts of it. So, we have a big crowd watching on YouTube at the moment and on Twitter as well. If you want to get your comments in, please do. A reminder, we're brought to you by Bamboo from Torpy. If you want to get 10% off, use the promo code Ourgame. It's all caps at the moment. That might change in the next week or two. We'll talk about Tipperary and Cork, and actually we'll be moving on to Kilkenny against Antrim then, which is in Division 1 Group B. So who of the traditional three, and obviously Tipperary, Cork and Kilkenny are always talked about as the traditional three, having won so many All-Irelands between them. Who do you think of the traditional three is most likely to contend this week if we're to just go on the basis of what we saw last week, which is a very small sample size, but look, the teams hadn't hurled for 6 months before that?
If you were to go from the reaction of most Corkonians after last weekend, like, it's a foregone conclusion.
Cork are back.
McCarthy, yeah.
Cork are back.
Well, that seems to be what people think, and I do think perspective needs to be kept here. Like, I've gone all in on Cork a couple of times, and they've broke my heart from the point of view of, you're just thinking, okay, they have all the ability, they have all the hurlers that they need, and then there's been failings in big. Absolutely walking through them. So, like, I'm definitely, like, last weekend was a very good result. It did have the look of an exhibition game to them. Cork will win. If you try to play a score fest against Cork, Cork will win nearly every time. You're going to have to see an awful lot more. I would say, probably toughness to the play. I'm going to have to see it on a regular basis. Like, after last weekend, while Tip blew a lead against Limerick, they still drew with the reigning Munster, All-Ireland and League champions. And that's something that no other team was able to do last year. And they were missing the likes of Seamus Callan. There was no Brendan Matter. Paddy Matter only came on at the end as well.
John McGrath didn't play.
On the basis, Noel McGrath as well. No sign of John McGrath yet. So, like, on the basis of last weekend, Kenny were good against Dublin, but, like, I've not been disingenuous to Dublin. I don't, like, if Cork played last year's All-Ireland finalists last weekend and were very good. Tip played last year's All-Ireland champions and were very good. Kilkenny played a Dublin team that only beat Laois last year. So, as the barometer based on last weekend, I would probably say Tip, because I think at least they found a way to be really, really competitive against Limerick and put themselves in a winning position. That's, no other team can say that really over the last 15 months. So I would say, based on last weekend, I'd probably say Tip.
So in a way, Cork, they showed us again that when they're on top, they can be flat track bullies and absolutely kill teams, like burst them apart and put up a big score. They didn't show us anything about being able to dig themselves out of a trench per se. Is that the kind of the point you're making? We didn't see anything new.
Yeah, pretty much. I'd love to see on a wet, miserable day
in
when
Stoke?
The ball's not maybe a miserable Wednesday night in Stoke, when the ball is just not coming into your hands straight away, when there's a lad absolutely dragging out you, when it's real physical, when it's a real miserable game where dogs are needed to really grind their teeth and get stuck in, how will Cork react to that? And I think that's the big question.
Do you know, a couple of years ago when they lost that All-Ireland semi-final to Limerick, and in extra time they brought back Seamus Harnedy and Dara Fitzgibbon onto the field, even though they were fairly crocked. So that's a reflection of where the management thought the panel was at that moment in time. Now, Kieran Kingston wasn't over that particular season. But do you think that there are signs now that the panel is a bit broader, that there are players that they feel like they can trust? It's early days for the likes of Aaron Connolly and Shane Barrett, but certainly Shane Kingston is a leading light at this point. Luke Meade showed signs. Seamus Harnedy, obviously, like, he's fit right now. He was actually somewhat quiet, although at times maybe I give credit to Robbie O'Flynn rather than him, because they look very similar out on the pitch at the moment. Jack O'Connor, he got his goal, quiet enough otherwise. Patrick Horgan, obviously, he's going to be class. So, is there more in reserve? Like, do they have a stronger panel?
I do think they do. Jack O'Connor probably played last year for the first time. Shane Barrett is only kind of coming in this year. He's only kind of coming in this. Dalton didn't play at the weekend, and he's obviously a massive, massive option too. I do think they have more options. Colin Spillane didn't play at the weekend, who's probably their most important defender. So they definitely have more strength in depth than they did. And even last year, if the only thing from their point of view that comes good out of last year is that a lot of guys got exposure at that level, then that's a positive for them. Because throwing lads in the first year, you don't really know how lads are going to react. If you've come in that in your second year and you've had a bit of turbulence the first year, you've seen what it's all about, you've learned what it's all about, you're much better placed over the winter to say, okay, I need to do X, Y, and Z to get up to this level. And you would hope from their point of view, and with Donal O'Grady's influence, who Cork people, like, as regards Donal O'Grady, the esteem that he's held in for what he has done for Cork and what people think he can do for this current Cork team is huge. So, like, you would imagine from a squad point of view, as you were asking there, that they are in a better place. They've had some of that. Those guys have had that exposure and know what it's all about, and that's key coming in the second year.
And it was interesting how many times that TG Carr panned over to Donal O'Grady during the game. Obviously, he's worked with them plenty over the years, so maybe it's sort of a fondness towards him. So we'll see how that pans out. I do think that squad is improving. It's just like we talked about it, the athleticism, it was there. But again, we just haven't seen what they're going to be like in the trenches. And they've probably let the supporters down a couple of times in terms of being in those tight games and not quite getting it done. And that Kilkenny game in 2019, I think that was probably one of the more damning ones, because you thought after 2018, right, it didn't quite happen against Limerick, maybe just using the bench improperly was the issue. But then the just absolute fade out was, that must have been a fair one to stomach.
Yeah, I think Darragh Fitzgibbon's a big one, Shane, as well. He obviously wasn't fit last year and only came on against Tipperary. He looks like he's absolutely bouncing, looks totally re-energised as well. And just what he offers in the middle of the field, he got 3 points, he missed another 3. Sitting back into defence, the speed, breaking the line that he offers. And players like that are huge. He's an all-star in 2018. And same, I think he was an all-star in 18 or 19. Sorry, and I can't remember. One of those years, Mark Coleman was the same. He got an all-star in his first year. And those guys have a good bit of experience under their belt. They've probably seen the highs and they've seen the lows already. So you'll be expecting Coleman, you'll be expecting Fitzgibbon, Shane Kingston. These should be the new faces of Cork hurling. Yeah. But again, as regards how will they react when there's loads of obstacles in the way, how will they react in a game that they shouldn't win technically when things are going against them? That's going to be really interesting to see how they react to that.
It might have even been 17 because they got to an All-Ireland semi-final, lost to Waterford. I remember Coleman had a good year up until the performance.
17, Coleman won one in 17, Fitzgibbon won one in 18.
Brick gave him a tough day in that All-Ireland semi-final as well. Lots of comments coming in here as well. We'll come to it in a little while. Do you see John Conlon staying at centre-back from Clare, says Conor Linehan, so we'll have to remember that one. Kevin Coleman, do you expect more integration of the young guys in Tip? Started a very experienced side against Limerick, aside from 1 or 2. And do we expect it? Like Brian O'Mara is going to miss the remainder of the league campaign after suffering a fractured arm against Limerick, and that happened late on in the game. Quite an unfortunate one. He'd had a steady game. I don't think he set the world alight, but a guy being thrown into the Lions' den against Limerick, I think you're going to more than take that. Much like Brian McGrath at full back, some great ball went into Seamus Flanagan, and the form he's in, his personal development is, as a player, has been really, really impressive. It's only 3 or 4 years ago that he couldn't get on the under-21 team, and now it looks very hard to drop him from the senior team. So, and it's because he, as a player, whether it's down to the coach or not, keeps getting better. But Brian McGrath still did quite well on him. So do we expect to see more integration of younger players? Maybe Paddy Cadell might get in there, maybe Keane Darcy get a start. But if the likes of Keane Darcy is going to get a start inside, or whoever's going to play in the forward line, more good ball has to go in, because the more I look back at that game at the weekend, very few nice deliveries went in, and maybe that's part of the reason that Tipperary didn't score from play in the second half.
Yeah, I don't expect too much integration, because I don't think there's time to integrate. They put in a couple of lads last week.
But why fail the same way as last year? Because it's without bringing through 1 or 2, you're not going to bridge the gap with Limerick. And you know what? Maybe no matter who Tipperary put on the team this year, maybe Liam Sheedy just doesn't quite have the resources playing-wise or the experience in the younger lads yet.
The only thing I'd say on that is they brought in 2 last weekend. They would have been delighted with how the 2 of them got on. Brian O'Mara is gone now. Brian McGrath, you'd imagine, will play again. Did well last weekend. So someone else will get to come in at wing back. I've kind of said this before. like it's integration to me, and integrating young players into a team is not changing the team too much and integrating, one at cornerback, maybe one at wing back, maybe one at wing forward. That's to me is integration, because the team will like 10 to 12 of your starters. So they play, and you integrate the new players around them, and then you get to see what they're actually like with the regulars beside them. If you're putting in 5 or 6 and you're starting, let's say, a new cornerback and a new wing back on the same side, that's very difficult. I think it's difficult to actually give a fair reflection on yourself in that case. No more than if you're starting a wing forward and a centre forward, 2 new players there. They're not used to playing together. They're not used to that level. Whereas if you're starting a guy wing forward, or you're starting, say, Paddy Cadell midfield, and we'll just say Noel McGrath is playing midfield beside him, well then to me that's a true reflection of Paddy Cadell and what he can do at that level. And just say if Paddy matters behind him and Brendan matters behind him as well, and we'll say the Bonner is in front of him, that's a true reflection of what he can actually do, because he's playing with seasoned guys there that know what's going on. So to me, that's I don't think I was ever thinking that Limerick or Tip were going to put in 5 or 6 guys. I think
it's unrealistic talk. Like, when you were breaking onto the Offaly team, for example, would you have been thrown in with experience around you, or did you ever have that situation where the first 15, we'll say, played a league game, and then there was a challenge match organised, and you would have been thrown in with a load of players that probably weren't going to start the league game, so it wasn't a fair reflection? I mean, I'd say most people, whether it's a club team or whatever, they've felt that at times, that the manager puts out a second team just to give them a game, almost placate the players, hopefully see a player or two. But you might feel that even half the time during this challenge game where you're getting your run, he mightn't even be fully paying attention to it because he's more focused on the first 15. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've had both sides of the scale. So when I was coming through, I've kind of been playing in league games, and you might have Ger Oakley beside you, Rory Hannafy outside you in the half line. So you'd have loads of experience around you. And then when all of a sudden you're gone to maybe number 20 or 21, you're playing a Walsh Cup game where maybe, I think I started a Walsh Cup game fullback or centre back maybe even, and all of a sudden you're expected to almost do something different. From playing cornerback, you're expected to go and play in a different position and almost adapt to that, whereas I would have been much happier to be playing with the first 15 at cornerback in the position that I'm going to be playing in.
So you're a fish out of the water then at centre back all of a sudden, and expected to develop into a centre back overnight.
Kind of, yeah. And sure, realistically, if you're going, like, I was never going to be playing centre back or anything like that. So I'm a big believer in trialing guys where you actually want to play them and trialing them around the guys that you want them to be playing with. So I don't expect too many changes for Tip. I'd say like max probably 3 new faces, and they're going to want to get a win this weekend. Like, they should have won last weekend, and then all of a sudden, if they go out this weekend and ship a defeat, then you're not that you're chasing your tail, but they could have had a win the first weekend. They didn't have a win. Now all of a sudden they have 1 point after 2 games, and then if you lose another game, then all of a sudden the face of your league looks an awful lot different. So I think both teams will be going pretty much gung-ho to win at the weekend, and I wouldn't be expecting too much experimentation on either side.
Yeah, but at the same time, you do, like, we're agreeing, you do have to have room to give guys a chance. I mean, I don't think anyone back at 2014 really knew all that much about Cathal Barrett. I'm sure people were familiar with his name in Tipperary, but that he'd be very quickly establishing himself as a brilliant cornerback for Tipperary and oust Michael Cahill from the position. I don't think anyone was thinking that. So you do have to give lads an opportunity, and like there probably will be 1 or 2 on either side. I'd imagine Cork will give the likes of Shane Barrett more time. Maybe they'll give Jack O'Connor another game, and Alan Connolly, maybe he'll even get a start as well, or maybe they'll keep using him from the bench. The couple of goals he got will be a bit of a boon to him.
Interesting, Shane. Will we see, like Cork, as I said, are going to want to play this challenge game style, real open style of game. Tip didn't allow Limerick to play that last weekend, and it'd be interesting to see if they bring that same sort of swarm and that same sort of intensity, that same sort of not giving the opposition time on the ball. Will we see that this weekend again, or will we see the a kind of a shootout? That's going to be interesting to me.
This is a perfect opportunity to see what the identity of these teams are going to be for the year. Number 1, we've talked about Cork. Can they dig in the trenches? That remains to be seen. Number 2, Tipperary, was that one swallow doesn't a summer make? that they played that way against Limerick, but they mightn't necessarily do it against Cork? Do they feel that there are some games where we'll enter a shootout and we are going to actually come out on top? And there's nothing to say that they necessarily would. I mean, Cork put up 5-22 and probably could have scored more. That's serious scoring. And Tipperary looked very blunt up front. So maybe a shootout wouldn't shoot Tipperary. I just want to mention one other player that I wonder would Liam Sheedy be thinking of throwing in this weekend, and assuming he's fit as well. Craig Morgan, a player.
I was just thinking about him because we haven't talked about him much, and he offers a lot to me now.
Yeah, because Barry Heffernan was used corner back, or in the full back line. Obviously, it's 2-3 in the full back line. It depends on what's going on, but at times marking Adrian Breen, and if good ball is going in, that's not an ideal matchup for a 6'4" guy, because Adrian Breen can turn on a sixpence and knock it over for anywhere. So maybe if Tipperary developed the likes of Craig Morgan, and there's another option or two here or there, you need to be able to have different horses for different courses. And I struggle with this. I'm not sure what Tipperary's best half back line is, because there's some great options there, whether you're looking at Seamus Kennedy staying at centre back, and I was impressed with plenty of what he did. Barry Heffernan is a massive physical presence and he can run all day, and when he carries the ball out, you often see players trying to pull and drag out of him, but he stays going forward. You understand this, as you get older as a player, you start running into contact and all of a sudden you realise, I'm not actually moving forward anymore. I used to move forward and now I have to go backwards and try and strike it on the back foot. So if you have somebody like Seamus Kennedy who's on the running on the top of the ground, and the same with Barry Heffernan, and then Ronan Maher as well, even if you had the three of those as a half back line, that's a serious proposition. Then it's fitting all the pieces around them. And that's the thing with Tip, unlike Limerick, who have 25, 30 options, and you feel they're so versatile, you could put them all into different positions, and their game plan is so well established. For Tipperary, they're still trying to pull this thing together.
Yeah, there's a small bit of that to it, all right, and they don't know their best team, and particularly probably at the back. You probably have a fair idea what probably 5 of the 6 forwards are going to be, but at the back you don't. I did like the look of Seamus Kennedy. I think going with those big athletic players who can get back and cover a lot of space, but can also do the Kyle Hayes on it, break a tackle and break the line and put teams on the back foot. Both Heffernan and Kennedy can definitely do that. Maybe Ronan Maher not as much, but he's so good on the ball, and his delivery of ball in is so good. And you see as a half back now as well, the amount of ground you need to be able to cover when you're coming up against a Tom Morrissey or a Gerard Hegarty and these guys. So I think they're looking at more mobility in that half back line in particular, probably half back line and even midfield as well. Probably not, to be honest with you, it's probably that middle eight that they're looking at that mobility from. So it'd be interesting to see where Brendan Maher fits into the pieces and where Pádraig Maher fits in as well. Would it be fair to say if Pádraig Maher's not playing the half back line, he's not playing anywhere for Tip?
I would say possibly not, because the full back line is a very unforgiving position these days and demands serious pace and agility. And he is himself and Noel McGrath are two players who look like they've kind of leaned up a bit. And I don't know if you've ever heard this about Cristiano Ronaldo, that once he hit 30, every year he was looking to lose, I think it was a kilo in terms of weight. Now obviously he's just becoming more and more lean with that. So maybe that's the approach from players that are, that little bit older as well. But I would imagine it would be the half back line if he was going to play anywhere. He might be under pressure to get in this year. But I thought it was interesting that Pádraig Maher was brought in rather than maybe Paddy Cadell, because I thought Cadell is somebody who'd get more time this year. But Paddy was brought in late on when Brian O'Mara got injured. So that to me suggests that that Liam Sheedy still sees a role for him. I think Brendan Maher could end up being that travelling number 4 this year, or maybe a sweeper, depending on, again, that's the versatility that Limerick have. Certain players of the Tipperary team have that as well. So a couple of other comments have come in. You can jump in on the back of that if you want. John Collins with plenty of positive comments for the show, so appreciate that, John. Michael, I'll come back to Michael Lucy's comment, but John Collins also added in. On Cork, I'd have concerns as to the defensive capability of Mark Coleman and the hurling ability of Damien Cahalane, both central characters in a defence that wasn't really tested last weekend. Now, to be fair, I do think Damien Cahalane had a good game. The odd time people question is hurling, but still, it's only a couple of years ago that he punished Clare by carrying ball upfield and delivering it well.
The thing about Mark Coleman is, and I agree with his question, and I agree with the premise of it, teams will try and make him defend. Teams will not try and let him dictate if he tries to sit back into that pocket at number 6, which he probably will try and do. So I think teams will try and go after him, try and make him pick up someone, or make him make a decision that he's going to have to come out the field and drag him away from that area. We know how good he is on the ball. It's like what Brick did in the 2017 All-Ireland semi-final. It's really kind of bring him into a battle, and I think that's what teams will try and do. So it's going to be interesting to see if he stays at number 6. I think that's how teams will go after him. Again, we're good for you to call Cork boys. We know what they're like on the ball. It's just what they're going to be like without the ball. And if teams make them uncomfortable and put them in uncomfortable positions without the ball.
Yeah, and are they savages without the ball? I think Owen Cadigan and Colm Spillane would eat you
without salt.
Yeah, they would.
But it's just a matter of, not saying everybody has to do that, but it's just a matter of getting that savage kind of mentality. And as we said before, that savage mentality is just getting in a lad's face, putting pressure on him. It's not necessarily leaving him on the back of his arse or anything like that.
Conor Linehan asked, what about Alan Tynan? So for people who don't know, Alan Tynan was an underage dual player for Tipperary, but also was playing rugby and won the Colleges Cup with Cistercian in Roscrea. And he looked like he would go on and, could be brilliant at any sport. So he played with Ireland under 20. He was with Munster as well. And I actually went down a rabbit hole of what, because I knew he was back with Tipperary. And I went down a rabbit hole of watching some of the rugby videos of him there about a week or two ago, just to see what physical shape he's in. And he has great feet, great pace, that type of thing. But as other players have found out over the years, it can be very difficult to just hit the ground running after giving up hurling for a couple of years.
Yeah, and again, if he's not integrated throughout the league, how are they going to know whether he's up to that level as well? But I'd imagine he's probably playing a bit of chase up just on the time that he would have missed. I believe there was a potential of a contract on the table for him in France as well to go and play over there, even though he saw very little game time at Munster. And just chatting to some rugby aficionados, they were very surprised that he didn't see much game time at Munster, because they thought he was very well thought of down there, but that might point to more of some of the problems that are in Munster at the moment, more than anything else, more than Alan Tylan's ability as a rugby player. But interesting to see that Sheedy has called him in. Obviously thinks he can offer something physically. He would have played very, very little with Roscrea in recent years, so he's playing a lot of catch-up at the moment. And this sort of year doesn't suit probably a guy that's playing catch-up. Be interesting to see how he's integrated. Will he get 10 minutes here? Will he get 15 minutes there? Will they, the likes of Stephen O'Brien was thrown in coming back from football to hurling. He played a few games, maybe didn't get on as well as people expected, and ended up back with the footballers as well. So I just don't know if the year the way it's laid out will suit him. Your inter-county season is very, very short. Your contact time, Liam Sheedy's contact time with Alan Tynan is from April 19th until, what are we looking at? Mid to late August, so that's 4 months.
Whatever day the All-Ireland final is.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's the max time you can have with him is 4 months, which is very, very. Is it May, June, July, August? 4 months, which is very, very little for a player who has played very little hurling to get up to inter-county standard. And this isn't Joe McDonough or Christy Regan standard. This is elite All-Ireland contender standard. So I'm not sure if he's going to feature much, and if this maybe is a longer term project. Yeah,
and Daniel Kennedy added in, he said, sound skipping my comment. I missed his comment there because I'm doing a couple of things here at the minute, so sorry about that, Daniel. He had asked about Alan Tynan, but also Billy McCarthy. So if Billy McCarthy, who obviously
they reckon.
He had that horrendous injury a couple of years ago, a knee injury. It was probably not too dissimilar to what happened to Tom Parsons when he played for Mayo against Galway a couple of years ago. So yeah, the talk is July. If he hits the ground running and is able to get back to the form that he showed in 2018, he could be a valuable asset. Because Tipperary have a lot of forwards that are fairly similar in the sense of they're lovely, silky players, but Billy McCarthy is a guy who can win his own ball, and he's the sort of guy that when the team isn't playing well, he actually does play well and stands out, which is a good sign of a lad, a firefighter out there. So I think he
was one of the few that stood up in that bad 2018 season. In fairness, one of the very few.
Yeah. So a lot of the players need the team to be on the front foot. I mean, that often happens with certain amount of silky players. Once the team is on the front foot, yeah, you'll dance all over the opposition. But then if things are going badly, you need a few lads to sort of drag you out of the fire.
Oh, give me one of those lads every day of the week. The boys that'll deliver. That you know what you're going to get from them every day. Give me one of the boys. Give me one of those lads that if you've been beaten by 10 points, he plays better than if you're winning by 10 points.
So now we'll jump on to Kilkenny. We've talked about the traditional three, and Kilkenny are the third of that. Obviously, have more All-Irelands than anybody else. Beat Dublin by 5.
That pains you to say it. Oh, jeez, it pains you to say it. And you could be working in journalism for a long time before you're not still saying that.
But there's the 4 football All-Irelands in there, so, we're closer than people think, Kilkenny, they were in some parts impressive last weekend. Controlled performance against Dublin, won by 5 points. Dublin certainly didn't blow me away in that game. Are there reasons where you'd be thinking Kilkenny can mount a big charge this year? What are you thinking? They certainly got the more favourable side of the draw with the teams that are in division or that are in Group B. It's themselves, Antrim, Laois, Dublin, Clare and Wexford.
Yeah, this potentially could be a prelude to a Leinster semi-final, I think. Kilkenny are on that side. They play the winners of Antrim and Dublin, I think. Like, Kilkenny will fancy themselves to be top of Group 1B, and they'll fancy themselves to at least get to a Leinster final. The question you asked about, what changes have we seen? Have we seen any progress? I think maybe Paddy Deegan back at cornerback, I think is maybe more suitable for him. Pádraig Walsh was outstanding the other day at the heart of the defence. He was very, very good. Hugh Lawler had a very solid game too. If you're looking about unearthing new players, it's not the new, because he was one of the best players they had in the 2018 league. But Martin Keown was brilliant the other day. And I think any day that TJ Reid is quiet and Kilkenny win is a good day. Adrian Mullen got 35 minutes under his belt. Looked quite hesitant, to be honest with you. Now, but that's his first game in 15 months. He had the expectation of captaincy on his shoulders as well. He's still only 21. I'd imagine they will try and give him more minutes without flogging him. They'll give him more minutes over the next while, get him back up to speed, and want to have him back up to speed for championship. I think the big one is in Kilkenny is to try and settle on the midfield. Richie Latty being out obviously robs them an option from there. If they're looking at Killian Buckley midfield, I've never personally thought that was his best position. I think he's a better half-back or a better centre-back. But you're probably looking at maybe Conor Fogarty when he comes back in there. Conor Brown was wing-back the other day and was good, but they need to settle on that too in the middle of the pitch. And they need to have, all the big teams have a consistent combination, be it Will O'Donoghue, Darragh O'Donovan, Jamie Byrne in the middle of the field for Waterford. You know who's going to be playing there, and it's such a key position now, because if your wing backs and your centre back need to know who the midfield is, they need to have a partnership and a relationship built up with them. Same with the half forward line. If you're interchanging the whole time, you don't have that same kind of rapport. But I think one of the main things out of the league that Brian Cody will try and cement is who are the two in the middle of the field.
Yeah, I don't know if actually all that many teams know who both of their midfielders are going to be. In Limerick's case, they've at least 3 to pick from all the time. So no matter who they pick, that's pretty solid. With Tipperary, I think we're probably not sure who's going to be midfield this year.
I don't think that's a good thing.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. Like, Kilkenny probably don't know who their midfield is going to be. Like you said, Richie Latty coming off fairly distraught last week, another hamstring injury. I don't think Dublin know necessarily who's going to be midfield. I don't know if, Clare will probably, if Colm Galvin is fit, he'll probably be there. Whether Tony Kelly will be there or playing somewhere else is another question. Waterford will have Jamie Barnes, so that's obviously good to know that he's going to be there. They're wondering, I'd say they're still trying to figure out who the other one will be. Cork, definitely Darragh Fitzgibbon. After that, there may be 1 or 2 options tried out. So, and Wexford, Dee O'Keefe is going to be there. But yeah, it's pretty tough to actually nail down a duo at midfield.
No, it is.
And do you know why? Because I think it's I've said this already, I think it's the hardest position in hurling to play in terms of knowing where to be positionally.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really tough position to play, particularly when things are going bad and you're playing against a team that's set up well tactically and that everybody knows their role. You can just end up running up and down the pitch and not touching the ball and not having an influence on play at all. It used to always be said that the ball was going over and back over the midfielders and they were having no influence on the game. Now they should be breaking on a puck out on their own half-back line. They should be breaking on a puck out in the opposition half-back line. They need to be under the puck out on both wings. They need to be an option if like you'd see Will O'Donoghue often picking up the ball in his own 45 with a stick pass from Declan Hannon. The work that they do and on both ends of the field is huge, and I think it's no coincidence that the All-Ireland champions are the ones that probably we know what their midfield pairing is going to be for the rest of the year, barring an injury, and the other teams are not so sure. Like Conor Fogarty, you'd probably say, is probably going to be one of the Kilkenny midfield. Plays wing back sometimes as well, though, too. So I think there's a definitely, like the two teams that played last weekend, Kilkenny and Dublin, definitely, if they want to do anything this year, anything really big this year, they both will have to sort out their midfield pairing and get a solidified kind of a partnership there.
Yeah, I wonder will Joey Holden see time this weekend?
I can't believe, Shane, that it does mystify me. I thought he was one of their. I thought he was very good throughout 2019, and then all of a sudden, he did quiet enough All Ireland final. A lot of lads had a quiet enough All Ireland final on the Kilkenny side, and then like he hasn't played too many games since, which I find is strange because he's not spectacular, but you know exactly what you're going to get from him every day, and if he's marking. He has stopped many of the best forwards in the games when he's come up against them. So I think that's a strange one that he's seen very little game time since the 2019 All Ireland final.
Yeah, Tommy Walsh has also showed some signs last year, and I think most people would have seen that Tullaroan against Ballyhale game last. I suppose it was probably around September last year, maybe August, where he got man of the match on telly playing against Colin Fennelly, which is not to be sniffed at either, especially when Ballyhale is such a stacked team.
He was to start last weekend, Shane, I believe, and picked up an injury midweek, but I believe he was to start and Kieran Wallace came in for him. So he's a real ball-playing defender too, so they might be looking in that direction. I don't know when he's going to be back fit again, but he'll have a good chance of, he'll be thereabouts for championship selection, I'd say.
David Blanchfield is a player that's spoken of in very positive light. Bennett's Bridge lad. Actually, Liam Blanchfield was also on the bench last weekend. And Richie Reid, will he be looking to lay down a claim for one of those? I mean, a lot of these players that we're talking about here are half backs. I mean, Dara Corcoran, he played last weekend, did some good stuff. Probably has a small bit more filling out to do, but he certainly has hurling. Conor Brown was tried midfield, he's half back. You've mentioned Killian Buckley, he's a half back. Some would argue that Paddy Deegan, who plays centre back for O'Loughlin Gales, maybe he's a half back. Joey Holden used to play wing back. Richie Reid plays half back and an awful lot of half backs here, and as we always say, the half back line and certainly wing back is the easiest position on the field to play.
We've often said, like, at club level in Borough, like that, we have about 10 lads where their best position is half back, and a lot of teams have that because I don't know, everybody loves playing wing back and getting on a good bit of ball, but there's obviously only 3 spots, maybe one guy that's going to come in. So a lot of the time you have to find other positions for them, and Kilkenny probably, we're not so sure. Like I still think Joey Holden is one of their better cornerbacks, and I think I don't think there's 2 better cornerbacks than him in Kilkenny. Interesting that Tommy Walsh hasn't not won his place back. He never lost it. But interesting, he wasn't playing at the weekend. There was no sign of Conor Delaney either. So I suppose from a Kilkenny point of view, you're talking about a good few guys that they're missing when you throw in Wally Walsh and Richie Hogan as well. And a good few boys maybe stepped up to the plate last weekend. It'll be interesting this weekend now. They're coming up against an Antrim side. Absolutely, they must be flying. They must be bouncing after last weekend. Darren Gleeson obviously has worked the oracle up there. They seem to be a county that are really all pulling together, all pulling in the right direction.
Which is great to see, because hurling needs every team.
Yeah. Because there's always been some untapped potential in Antrim, and we know of all the hurling up the Glens, the likes of Lougheed, the likes of Dunley. We know how passionate they all are, but he's obviously pulled the whole thing together. I know he's been a big pusher of the Galefast programme, where they're trying to get way more people playing hurling in around Belfast. And I know Neil McManus was on the radio the other day basically saying that that's an untapped centre for the GAA as well. So it'll be interesting to see if Antrim can stay up at this level and kind of keep their trajectory going and up a bit higher. This will have a massive effect on future generations, you'd hope as well, and maybe you get Casement Park open in a couple of years too, and then all of a sudden Antrim are looking, in a different direction completely, and they're back up around the top table again too. But Darren Gleeson, it's a big test for him. He would have obviously been in goals for a lot of Tipperary teams. That Cody was on the sideline against them for Kilkenny. So his managerial ascent has been very, very rapid, and I know he'll he'll absolutely love that test. And even like after last weekend, he was already very, very quickly like, I wouldn't say it was tongue in cheek. I'd say they did really, really enjoy their success, but he was already looking at, what's the next thing they're going to do. He just said, we have a foundation laid within the group and we have to try and push on now and establish ourselves. One win won't do that for us. It means we have 2 points on the board and we go again next week with a bit of confidence to the standard bearers over the last 20 years in Nolan Park. The boys will be looking forward to it. Every game is an opportunity to go out and represent your county. The county jersey is important. I think we have instilled that again. All the players come from fantastic clubs, and all we want to do is represent the county well. That's a great. It's a great mantra to have within a team, and I know that he'll relish the challenge going down to Nolan Park on Sunday.
They were the standard bearers. Are they the standard bearers in the last 5 years? Still Leinster champions. But then again, like, is it sort of an underhanded insult really to the players in a way that this was Cody's greatest achievement to win a Leinster title? Like, that is suggesting that player-wise, they're no longer the standard bearers.
Yeah, I don't think that's been disrespectful to anyone there. Like, if you ask anybody, hand on heart, like the Kilkenny squad now it's incomparable with previous squads of a decade ago. That's just fact. They don't have the same. They don't have the same, depth.
And
as
in
those
fact,
teams.
it's even like previously, if a player was dropped off the panel, and I'll pick a name like John Dalton, like I can't remember ever seeing him back on a panel again, even though he had looked like a brilliant prospect and would have had years of being in the team ahead of him. Nowadays, players are getting dropped off the panel, and we're seeing them back on the panel again and back into matchday squads once more. So I think that's reflective of the situation.
No, 100%. Yeah, James Maher would have been dropped from the squad and is back in. I don't know if Darren Mullen left the squad or was dropped, but he's back in again. That would have. I remember when Mark Bergen started the All Ireland semi-final against Waterford, the replay. I think he was only the second or third Kilkenny player that had been dropped and recalled, whereas there's probably been. There's been probably double or triple that in the the 5 years that have followed since, and it's just like. It would have been the same down in Kerry even. You would have had a wealth of riches. You don't maybe have the same wealth of riches now. So almost Cody's mentality has probably had to change. He's probably had to look after what he has a bit more. He probably can't be as ruthless, to be honest with you. You probably, don't get me wrong, there's still a massive ruthless streak to him. But you can't be as ruthless and you can't just cast aside a guy, because chances are the guy that you're casting aside, the lads replacing him are not as good, and you're going to need that guy again, and that has shown itself to be true.
Yeah, TJ Reid didn't score from play last weekend, but this could be a game where he goes on fire. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the Antrim forward line. Can Kieran Clark frank that form that he showed last week? But I don't suspect that Owen Murphy's going to be making too many mistakes in goal, to whether that's short puck outs going directly to Antrim attackers or whether that's letting in clangers. That's not really what we see from Owen Murphy. So I think Antrim have to be fully on top of their game here. Neil McMahon has said afterwards, we're not that worried about pressure, to be honest. We're just hurling away and really, really enjoying it. What's not to enjoy? We're back playing, getting to mark Tony Kelly there for bits and pieces, the best players in the country. So that's where you need to test yourself. And the big thing for Antrim is to not suffer a defeat like what Westmeath suffered last weekend. Now, maybe Kilkenny can put up that sort of a scoreline, maybe not. Remains to be seen. But you
don't see that happening in 1B, Shane. I think that's a luxury of being in 1B.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But you do want Antrim to continue to sort of make strides. But it'd be interesting to see the response from Kilkenny, because they'll be looking to put up a decent scoreline here and even sort of say to themselves, look, there's still plenty of scores in us, and what we've just said there about no longer quite being the standard bearers of before sort of ram that down people's throats or whatever it might be. But we'll see. We'll move on to Laois against Dublin, and a comment came in from, let me just check and see who that was from, Michael Lucy. Again, get your comments in. We're brought to you by Bamboo. Get 10% off with the new Bamboo Hurley with the promo code Ourgame. Use all caps for now. So what do you think of Dublin, says Michael Lucy? We seem to have dropped so far since Anthony Daly's days. What do you think, lads? Bring back Daly. Well, look, obviously Matty Kenny was my manager for 5 years. I'll back Matty all day. Anthony Daly obviously did a brilliant job there, so that's obviously nothing against him. But like, the players aren't there in Dublin really to be beating the best teams out there. They're always going to be competitive. The players will always have great application and die with their boots on. Don't necessarily agree with every selection or every tactical thing that Dublin are doing just now. But I have no doubt that there's no stone being left unturned with this setup.
Yeah, I have a piece in the Independent on Saturday. I haven't got around to writing it yet with former Dublin manager Humphrey Kelleher, who was part of the Dublin hurling blueprint 20 years ago. And obviously, the chief aim of that was for Dublin to win a senior All Ireland. And while obviously your lads, Coola, won 2 senior club All Irelands, there's been no senior hurling championship All Ireland one. Obviously, 2013 getting to the semi final was the furthest that they've gotten. But he'd have an awful lot of worry about where the direction Dublin hurling is in and the state that Dublin hurling is in and the level of coaching that has been done. And he just says that things have changed very little from when the blueprint was put in place, and that things haven't stepped up or progressed. And he questioned the desire amongst Dublin County Board to really push on and really, really develop hurling in the county. And he says there's a knock-on effect. He believes there's a knock-on effect at senior inter-county level now, basically within Matty Kenny's squad, and that Matty Kenny has inherited a squad that are not lacking in desire, but that just haven't had the work put into them. So that's an interesting piece, quite hard hitting stuff now, to be honest with you. Someone who's obviously not from Dublin originally, from Waterford originally, but massive, had a massive influence on Dublin hurling since he came in, and he wouldn't be particularly confident of the directions Dublin hurling is heading in over the next 10 to 15 years unless big changes happen. So,
well, let's call it spade a spade. There are a certain amount of players that haven't opted into the panel. I'm not saying they'd set the world alight, but there are a few players that they're shy there. And then the best hurlers in the county, if they had continued to play hurling, are probably on the football side of things. Kieran Kilkenny, Cormac Costello, probably, well, obviously Conor O'Callaghan, one or two more in there as well. Like if you took, and I mean, let's pick players who potential-wise might be equivalent, and I'll just go with Tipperary as my own county. If you took Seamus Callan out of the team, if you took Jason Ford out of the team, if you took John McGrath out of the team, it's going to be a far weaker proposition, and we're going to be saying, yeah, they lack a little something up front. Dublin don't lack a little something in the back line. They lack a couple in midfield and they lack a couple in attack, and you could argue that one or two lads who are on the bench might be in the team or out of the team, but it's a toss of a coin, really. But they, like, if you're down, take TJ Reid out of the Kilkenny team at the moment, people are going to be talking about what they're lacking. I mean, there's a couple of counties that are exceptions to that rule, like Limerick at the moment. But there's a reality to it as well. It isn't just a case of, look, Dublin don't love their hurling as much as anybody else. They definitely do. And I walk around and I see more people carrying hurleys around the streets than I used to in the past. So there's parts I agree and parts where I disagree. And some of it's just, some of the better lads just aren't quite playing.
Yeah, throw Conor O'Callaghan, throw Kieran Kilkenny, throw Cormac Costello, all players that are going to play from 8 up into that, and obviously we don't know exactly how they would have went at senior inter-county, but I'd imagine it would have been pretty good. Yeah. Potential wise, of course. Yeah. What Humphrey says as well, though, is interesting, that it's his belief that a guy that could go and play either hurling or football just does not see the same direction and the same aspiration within Dublin hurling. And I'm not talking about senior inter-county setup. I'm talking about within where hurling is, the level of priority hurling is placed within Dublin. They don't see that same level of priority or progress with the hurlers and the footballers, and that it's a no-brainer to go with the football side. He even pointed back to, he said when he was in charge, I'm going to say from about 04 to 06, but I'm not 100%, he had lost Conal Keeney during that time, and obviously he said he wanted Conal Keeney, but he said Keeney could basically see that Dublin hurling wasn't where he wanted it to be. He said there just wasn't that level of ambition there. And Anthony Daly has said regularly that the big spark in his reign in Dublin was getting Keeney back, because he saw that Dublin hurling had changed and that their level of their goals and where they could reach had changed, and that was basically one of the main reasons why he came back. And look at how close they came to winning All Ireland as a result of that. But I'd be a bit worried about, for all the resources that they have and for all the talent that they have, I'm just not sure where Dublin hurling is at the moment. I think they're falling well down the pecking order.
Yeah, a couple of comments in. Daniel Kennedy says hurling is the new rugby. in a lot of South Dublin areas. So, like, I mean, Coláiste Owen and that does churn out a lot of good hurlers, and they're obviously very good at schools level. Michael Lucy, but lads, Cork destroyed our backs last year. Cork did destroy the Dublin backs last year, but I mean, I said at the time I wasn't fully sure about the way that Dublin set up in that game, and Chris Crummy wasn't in the back line that year. Sean Moran had been dropped. He was taken off the other day as well. So I just didn't feel that was... I thought Dublin were particularly poor that day. Another comment in from Martin Furlong, and obviously get your comments in, please do. Dublin are still very competitive at minor and are regularly getting to finals. They've had a good record recently at that grade over my own county, Wexford. So are Wexford in trouble if that is the case? So, yeah, look...
No, I don't necessarily think so. I think if you look at the Dublin footballers, maybe would be setting the world alight at minor and to a lesser extent under 20 level, but they're preparing players to play senior football. The problem with Dublin is not been underage success. It's actually getting those guys through from 18 and 20 to senior to make that step. Whereas I actually think Wexford and a good few other counties are better placed to make the step from underage level to senior hurling than Dublin are.
Okay, so Laois, a couple of interesting stats that Stephen Miller had in Laois today when he summed up the heavy defeat to Wexford last weekend. He said at 19-point loss, 21 wides, over 20 minutes without a score in the first half when Laois had the win. 4 goals conceded, only 10 points scored, a litany of mistakes and poor decision making. Now on the plus side, he did say PJ Scully, Kieran Collier, Chad Wire all returned to the Laois jersey after being absent for different reasons over the last couple of years. Fiach Racine Fennell was excellent in the first half, forcing 5 turnovers and putting in a hugely energetic display. He added that the result extends Laois's winless league run against the established Liam McCarthy Cup teams to 29 games, a 10-year spell. Could you guess who that last win was against in the league in 2011 for Laois, the Liam McCarthy teams?
Was it Offaly at the time?
No, sorry, that would never have even entered my head.
Good man. Oh, gee, I very nearly came out with a couple of expletives there, and then I realised we were live.
No, it was against Clare. Actually, there was another interesting point that Stephen had said, or had made. David Dooley was denied history. So David Dooley was named to start this game, and it would have been a bit of history for him too, as he would have represented his county at senior level before his club. However, a Croke Park ruling that prevents players who are just out of minor from playing adult inter-county straight away means that he'll not be eligible until 2022.
Yeah, actually, that's mad. It's mad that that they weren't aware of that even. It's one of those things, I suppose, that you don't even realise, but they obviously weren't aware of it. And I wonder if he had played, what would the ramifications have been, or who exactly stepped in to kind of wise them up on it.
Yeah, maybe the sanctions would have been similar to those that if you were training during COVID and caught, i.e. no sanctions.
Good man.
It might be something like that.
Deeply regrettable.
Yeah, and like we can't believe it and we're forever sorry and all that kind of stuff. So we'll move on to Clare against Wexford this weekend. Davy versus...
How have we got through about an hour and 10 minutes without talking about the Davy derby?
Davy v Lohan, part 3. We saw it a couple of times last year, and obviously we gorge on this sort of stuff. It's great stuff altogether. But Wexford have certainly been on the hind tit against Clare in the last year or two. Like Davies, I would say he senses that those players, those Clare players that he used to have, they're coming in a nice bit hyped up. Just because you don't want to lose against your former manager, do you? And much like Davy does, he wants to show up and give a good account of his team against Clare.
No, I'm sure that like the Clare boys, and you saw it after the game last year, they have the utmost respect for them. But like I even found it when I remember when I was teaching in Banner College and we'd play against my own school in St. Brendan's, where I went to school for 7 long years and did the Leaving Cert 3 times, and I'd have a serious affinity to the place. But when we played against them, there's something in you that makes you that almost fires you up a bit more. I don't know what it was. And then when the game is over, it's gone. But during the game, you do want to win nearly more than against anybody else. So I'm sure the Clare boys are bringing that. I'm sure they've great time for Davy. Memories that will last a lifetime of winning All Ireland together in 2013. But they want to win against him more than anybody else. It's almost human nature.
So when you were looking to get into college then, were they able to add up the points you got from the 3 separate leaving certs and try and get you into a course? Or
didn't even make 600 points between the 3 leaving certs.
There's a shock. But like Davy was asked this week, and I was interviewing him yesterday as well, about whether this would be his last year, his 5th year, because everyone keeps assuming that it's his final season. And he goes, I could have walked away in 19. Obviously, a reminder, they won the Leinster that year and had Tipperary on the rack in the All-Ireland semi-final, but were ultimately had that game turned around. He goes, we were in a puck of the All-Ireland. We were right there. I could have said, yeah, I've left them in an unbelievable place. So there's no suggestion that he's decided that this is his final year. But he certainly would need a good one, I think, for everyone to justify him staying another one.
100%, yeah. I'm actually just looking up something here because people were under the assumption that he was gone in his 5th year. I'm fairly sure because he said when he signed up for the 2020 season that it was a 2-year contract and that he was going to be gone at the end of that. Like I can't find it here, but I'm fairly certain that he did, because I remember it being big business at the time. He signed up for 2020 and he signed up for 2021, and that was going to be it. But all of a sudden that seems to have changed over time. He was never going to go at the end of last year, with how they went out with a whimper. Really, it was really, really poor stuff against Clare and very, very poor against Galway as well. And they just looked like they'd flatlined after, maybe doing too much during the lockdown. But like, you'd imagine that like they did a good win last weekend. Clare are coming into this week after on the back of a bad defeat. Davy will have the Wexford lads hyped. But by God, Lohan will have the Clare boys absolutely hyped, and by all accounts, I heard there was a few skirmishes in their training, in the training session after the Antrim game, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Tensions are obviously fairly high. Clare were coming into that game against Wexford last year, that qualifier in Portlaoise, on the back of scraping over Laois, barely getting over them. And there was an almighty backlash against Wexford. And I'd be expecting, how often do you see a bad defeat followed by, a reaction? So I think it makes this game even more interesting, just because Clare were going to get a reaction because they're facing Davy, but they're going to get an even bigger reaction because all the narrative since last Sunday has been, the disaster in Clare over the winter. It's transferring into on-field matters now. So you'd imagine they have a lot of questions to answer at the weekend. And again, I think it makes it even more interesting. Yeah,
well, it's a real opportunity for Brian Lohan to draw a line in the sand, and for the players to say, let's draw a line in the sand. Because a defeat like that against a team that you're expected to beat and beat well, I mean, that's without doing any disrespect to Antrim, that has got to rock you to the core and make, like, you can say to the players, look, if any of you now have any issues talking about like what training facilities, what we have, what we don't have, and all that kind of stuff, put that to the backs of your minds. We need to go out and give a performance here, because it's your club's reputations, you're representing your families, your reputation, all this kind of stuff. You can G them up to the last, and it's against the team that they've done quite well against in the last couple of years. But do you think that the Davy versus Lohan thing, it has less and less relevance, the whole edge between the two of them, the more we see this matchup?
No, I think it has more. I think it has more of an edge.
Because Davy will want it more now because Clare and Lohan keep beating him.
Yeah, that, and like whatever about not shaking hands and stuff like that. The various things that have happened over the winter, who have been two of the main characters behind it. Brian Lohan, while not publicly saying anything, but he's been one of the main ones, and Davy and the Fitzgerald family have been the other. And Davy
didn't want to talk about it yesterday, and obviously he was supporting a charity, so he was under no kind of he didn't have to do it, so he didn't do so. So we didn't get any further light from his point of view on that. He said actually if he was a younger man back in his previous days, he might have kind of spoken at length on it. But he says it's a bit wiser.
You get that now on me.
Yeah, you wouldn't. So that game.
But no, I do think, Shane. I think it's as high profile as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a pressure on Lohan now, and I'm sure his survival instincts will kick in. And not that they need any motivation. There's no lack of motivation. But I'm sure you'll see fire in his eyes. He was going to have fire in his eyes anyway, but he'd have more with the man that he's going to be facing.
So Clippers fan says Clare seem to lack a few players. We've kind of said that before, even though they're down one or two as well. And Conor Linehan again asks, do we expect John Conlon to remain at centre back? Can't imagine we'll see him in centre back for too long. I mean,
we had a comment in Shane that he was tried centre back for Clonlara and it didn't work either.
Yeah.
By one of our viewers. He's one of the most dangerous forwards in the game. and you can build a forward line around him. So I'd be surprised if he's not back up there. But as John Milan said to me there during the week, he said, like, whatever Lohan is going to get, abuse or whatever, going to get criticised over placing him there. Well, I suppose that's what the league is about. It's about trying guys. If it had worked, like maybe they'd have a centre back for championship, maybe he'd stick with him. But I think he's too much of an asset up in the forward line.
But there's converting some players. You can see the merit in it, but at no point, could I have ever imagined this working out. I think he might do an okay job. I'm not saying he'd get embarrassed at centre back, but I just don't see the merit in it. Even hypothetically, I don't see the merit in it.
Can I just say as well, on Conlon too, Conlon was the same as Adrian Mullen. It was essentially his first game in 15 months, and he was thrown in centre back against a team that were flying high, who were probably back a couple of weeks earlier than Clare.
And didn't have to sit in the car or a bus for 4 hours or whatever it might have been.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there are mitigating circumstances, but if Lohan wants to get the best out of Clare and get the best out of Conlon, I think he's full forward for me, or even half forward or centre forward.
Yeah, and it's not that he's obviously able to use the ball well back there, but and that's not necessarily all there is to centre back. So we'll just jump on to the League Division 2A, round 2 coming up. Offaly against Kerry. Obviously you were there last weekend as Michael Fennelly's team beat Meath. But just a little word of condolence that former Kerry goalkeeper Patrick Corrigan, Corridon I should say, apologies for mispronouncing his name there, passed away on Monday, so best wishes to all his family down there. But Kerry have had a strong record against Offaly in recent seasons, haven't they? Much to your chagrin. Chagrin. If that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah, they obviously relegated Offaly down to the Christie Ring down in Tralee 2 years ago. They beat them down. I'm not too sure if it was Tralee or Killarney that played them in last year. Could have been Tralee. Beat them in the league there in really bad conditions. So they've had the upper hand on them, beating them a score or two the last couple of times they've played. Shane Conway didn't play at the last weekend when they came back. I think they were 4 or 5 down against Down, and ended up banging in 4 goals in the second half. Shane Conway and Pádraig Doyle didn't play, or Pádraig Boyle I should say, didn't play that day. So like a big thing this weekend is their fitness, particularly Conway's fitness. That will probably swing the balance. If he's only playing at 80%, you'd probably maybe favour Offaly a small bit. But Kerry have definitely progressed massively. They were beating a score by Antrim in the 2A final last year. They were beating a score by Antrim again in the McDonagh final. Offaly were playing at Christie Ring level. Like that's the kind of the way you have to look at it. So to me, Offaly are actually favourites with the bookies, but Kerry to me would have to be favourites based on what we've seen in recent years. Offaly put up a big performance against Meath last weekend. Meath were poor. There's no point in saying any different. They were very poor. Offaly hit, I think, 11 wides in the first half. Could have been absolutely out of sight by the 20th minute. They hit 111 then in the second quarter and pulled totally away, and the game was over after half time. Worryingly though, conceded 3 goals, 2 of which were particularly soft, and they can't afford to concede those sort of goals against Kerry. This is probably a 60-40 game in Kerry's favour, and it's a real season definer for Offaly, to be honest with you, because there's no way that they shouldn't be coming out of Christie Ring this year with Down and Kildare both gone up. So the league is huge. If they are somehow able to get promoted to the top tier again, that would be absolutely massive. And then hopefully have Joe McDonagh hurling next year as well. So this might be only their second game of the year, but to me it's a season defining game.
Yeah, if you're in the Kerry panel and management team with Fintan O'Connor, you're probably saying to your players and your teammates that we only missed out on promotion to a league final, losing to Antrim. We weren't all that far away in that game. Antrim have beaten Clare. Lads, we're not too far away. This is the sort of talk that will go on in the dressing room. So, whereas Offaly, having not really impressed in the past couple of years, getting relegated out of Joe McDonagh, being in Christie Ring and not coming up out of there. Do you get the sense that it came down to a sort of a tight game, that Kerry might even have that little bit more confidence given where they've come from?
Potentially, yeah. It's probably, as we said before, it's a bit of stock in the bank, isn't it? It's just that bit of knowledge that you've probably done it against this team before, and you've probably came out. Kerry produced a really good finish last year to beat Carlow in the Joe McDonagh. they've won a good few tight games. Antrim were the only team I think that beat them last year, so they've come out on top in a lot of tight games. So they will have that confidence, but it does come with that caveat of a lot of the reasons why they maybe had that confidence down the stretch was having, Shane Conway, Podge Boyle, and these guys. Whether they're featuring this weekend is crucial, and they won't have a game under their belt as well, unlike the rest of their teammates. So that's gonna be huge. It's gonna be a massive game in Tullamore.
Yeah, Wicklow against Meath this weekend. So Wicklow lost to Carlow, and Meath, as we've already discussed, were beaten handily enough by Offaly last weekend. Crucial game for both because relegation would be staring them in the face.
Yeah, massive game for the two of them. Wicklow are about 7-4 actually to win this game, which I don't think is bad odds actually. They put it up to Carlow for long stages last week, whereas Meath were good in the first quarter and were kind of blown away thereafter, to be honest with you. It's a huge game for the two of them, and two sides that would have been very familiar with each other, having played in a 2B final in 2017 as well, and Down played Carlow in the other game as well. Down obviously were going well against Kerry for long stages, but again that comes with the caveat of it was a Kerry side that were missing two of their best players. Down
looked in good nick though. That's one thing when I was watching back the highlights. I was like, they physically look like they're in good shape, which is a positive thing.
Yeah, and I saw them against Offaly last year, and I saw them in the ring final against Kildare, and you'd have to say the same. Physically and conditioning wise, they're at a very, very good level. There are lots of good players. The keeper Stephen Keith is very good. Dottie Sands, Owen Sands, fullback Keelan Taggart. They've lots of good players, but I'd still think there's a pecking order in 2A with Carlow, Offaly, and Kildare. I think the other three are probably going to be down the other end. That's why that's why Wicklow and Meath is such a big game.
Yeah, we've Kildare against Donegal and Roscommon against Mayo in Division 2B, and then in 3A Armagh against Longford, Tyrone against Monaghan, also in 3B, that was 3A, 3B, Cavan Fermanagh and Leitrim against Louth as well. Anything in particular you want to pick up on in those games?
Yeah, no, the Kildare Donegal game is the Christy Ring Cup winners against the Nicky Rackard Cup winners, and Donegal are still in Rackard this year because there was no promotion. Whereas, so now they're actually playing each other, and one is in Rackard and one is in Joe McDonough's. So they're actually well apart now. Kildare didn't play last weekend, so don't have that game under their belts, whereas Donegal edged Roscommon, and Declan Coulter was influential. And Niall Cleary, who's an Offaly man living up in Donegal, he scored a point at the end as they won by 2, but you'd have to be fancying Kildare there. The Roscommon Mayo game is an interesting one too. Keith Higgins will be used to playing Roscommon footballers, not Roscommon hurlers. He was obviously captain last week. They did a right good win against Derry, and one of the points that was got in that game was it was a great point by the keeper Gerald Kelly. He took a sharp puck out to the full back and received it back a la Stephen O'Keefe and put it over the bar
from the 14 more or less, but there was a huge wind.
The wind is one thing. This Farskill thing with the ball, this ball is going to have to come to an end. The lightness of the ball is going to have to come to an end at some stage, in my view. I'd be favouring Mayo there, and obviously 3A and 3B didn't play last week, so they're all out for the first time this weekend. So it's the first full round of hurling action. An absolute plethora of games this weekend with no shortage of things to talk about.
Yeah, a couple of the cooler lads play with Cavan, and they played a challenge match against Tyrone last weekend. But because we were back first night training and all that, there's so much sneering going on that I wasn't even fully listening to how they said the game went on. So apologies, I'm not sure how that went. So plenty of hurling.
Just an interesting one, Shane, as well. Leitrim are playing Louth, and Leitrim for 2021 have no to racism emblazoned on the front of their jersey, which is obviously the best of causes, and it just sometimes. Things like that do come in the GAA, where it's supposed to be, how should you say, an apolitical organisation with no ties to anything. But there are, as you well know, some instances where the GAA does have an influence of things that are, basically not on-field activities.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it with the rainbow laces in the past. We've seen it even. Larry McCarthy was asked recently about vaccines, and he said, in terms of I suppose a vaccine passport or whatever the terminology being used at the time was, and he said we'll bring him in if we can. And you just wonder, who's making the decisions, why are they being made, that type of thing. I'm not saying right or wrong on that, but for an apolitical sort of an organisation, as we keep hearing, I don't know if it's
We
always
all
quite
know
as
that
political.
GAA is as political as they come.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
call a spade a spade.
Anyway, that's it for the Hurling Show, brought to you by Bamboo. We'll chat to you again on Monday. Thanks, Michael.
Cheers, Shane.
Welcome to Ourgame, brought to you in association with Torpy. Torpy are leading hurling into a new future with Bamboo, a revolutionary hurley created using their unique engineered hurling performance know-how. Already being used by many inter-county players, Torpy Bamboo is highly sustainable, offers players greater striking distance and a more consistent balance every time, without compromising on natural feel. Check them out at torpy.ie and enter the promo code OURGAME to get yourself 10% off.